Well, I had a kind of a rough beginning. My parents were, let us say, poor, and my mother was 40 when I was born, and my father was 47. And it was a tough beginning, and she died when I was 12. And my father when he was 18, so I was shunted from relative to relative in a matter of speaking until no one could afford me anymore. But I got a job as a messenger boy at the First Wisconsin National Bank, $50 a month. That was in February 1930. And right when the crash came in 1929, there were 12 of us, and inside a year, 10 of us were discharged. I was one of the lucky ones that had a job. And so I stayed there for 6.5 years, and I'm making $65 a month. And I asked the personnel manager that I wanted to be a teller. I told him, I didn't ask him, I told him. And he said, John, he says, to be a teller in this bank, you have to be 6 feet in height, and obviously you don't qualify. Well, that infuriated me, and so I resigned and said, I'll work till the end of the month. And he said, well, we'll try to get by. So I came out west. That was 1936. A wonderful trip. A friend and I from Eau Claire, Wisconsin, which is in the northern part, and we had a wonderful trip out here. It took us over a month. I had a 1927 Chev. It only goes 35 miles an hour, but it was a trip of a lifetime. Came out here and got a room at the YMCA for $5 a week, and walked in the First National Bank of Portland and got a job at $75 a month. So I was ahead of the game then already. And from then on, the rest is history. Well, my father, obviously at the age of 47, mother at 40, obviously wanted a son in the worst way. And I know it was a crushing blow to have a kid born with both feet were turned decidedly inward, and I didn't walk till I was 5 years old. But he heard about this doctor from Vienna, Austria, who was in a children's hospital in Chicago, which is only 80 miles from Milwaukee. And he got the doctor to come to take a look at my feet. And this doctor, Otto Miller was his name. He pronounced it Mueller. And he just smashed with his fist, his hand, broke both ankles, both feet at my ankles, and formed them and put them in casts. My right foot didn't seem to be going right, so we broke that one again. But it was 5 years before I could walk. And so I waddled around like a crab on my fanny. And going to school, when I started to go to school, I would stop at every neighbor's house and rest for a few minutes on their concrete steps because I didn't have any, my legs weren't strong enough. But it was a tough beginning, and yet the remarkable point of it all, and I look back, is the fact that I did so much hiking in my later years. My legs from my knee down is practically just a bone, and my muscles are all in my thighs. But the fact that I could do all this hiking I'm ever thankful for that, because I enjoyed it so much and still do. I wish I could keep going, but I can't anymore because of a heart attack. But I'm very proud of my feet. I think that doctor, and I went to see him before I came out west. He was still practicing in Chicago, and we had a nice chat, and I wanted to know if it was hereditary, because I wasn't going to have any children if that was hereditary. He said, no. He said, you just laid in your mother's womb the wrong way, and it happens on occasion. But it was nice to meet him and thank him personally. And also being short had a positive effect on me, because I always was facing big guys, 6'4", and it's a fun challenge to face big people, because sometimes they have an exalted opinion of themselves, and sometimes they don't, of course. And I have some good friends of mine who are tall, 6'4". Andy Anderson, for example. Ralph Voss was a tall man. But inwardly, a lot of people think height is a big thing in business, and maybe it is impressive. But a fellow small in stature can get ahead too if he fights. Determination means an awful lot. I was in Suffert's one day, and Don Heisler came in. He was the representative from Wasco County. Don was an attorney in the Dalles, and he came to me and he said, John, he says, a couple of us were talking about the legislature. I'm not going to run again, he says, and we think that you'd be a good choice. I was active in the area, and the furthest thing from my mind. And so I talked it over with the Sufferts, and they said, well, that'd be fine, sure. So I did. I filed, and in walks a person by the name of Giles French, sombrero and all. Giles French was a legendary character. He ran a little newspaper in Morrow, Oregon, population 200, yet he was widely quoted throughout the United States. A very straightforward, positive person. Some people called him obstinate. He stuck to his principles. And he come in the office and introduced himself, and I shook hands. I said, "I've heard so much about you, now I get a chance to meet you." And he said, "What do you know about the legislature, John?" I said, "I don't know anything about it. I've never even been in the state capitol." He says, "Would you like to learn?" I said, "Yes, I would." Well, he arranged meetings. Twice a month we met. And to think that this man who started in the legislature in 1935 would devote all this time to a neophyte like me, just brings tears to my eyes. He was that kind of a person. And so he would tell me how the legislature worked. And he showed me all about what role the lobbyists play. And they have an important role. They have a message to give to the legislators, their version of what this bill does to their business. And it pays you to listen to them because it's vitally important to them. And so all those things, and we met all that summer and into the fall. And then he was running for Speaker of the House. And so I traveled with him when we visited all the counties in Eastern Oregon. That was the 2nd District of Oregon. Well, not when he was in the House, that's when he ran for Congress. But he had, his district was Sherman County, Gillum County, Morrow County, and he was from 1935 until 1953. He represented that, he was their representative. And he had a high reputation for integrity, and he and I became good friends. And when he passed away in 1976, Mrs. French called me up and asked me to give the eulogy, which was a terrific honor for me. In fact, Mrs. French just passed away within the past year, 106 years old. Yeah, the Frenches were nice people. We traveled together. They knew our children, and we had a great relationship. He ran for Congress and was defeated. He was too positive in his views. He said, what do you think of the Pope, for example? Well, the Pope is the Pope. He's the head of the Catholic Church. What do you want me to tell? He didn't oil anything over with a pleasant manner. He's just very abrupt in his comments, which was very much misunderstood by a lot of people. But when you ask him a question, you got a straightforward answer. I have a host of letters in my file about him, and I cherish the things that he wrote. When he thought I was getting too big for my britches, he sure could take me down a notch or two. And again, climbing up the corporate ladder is tough. And if he thought I was down a little bit, he did things to bolster my spirits. He's one of the 5 most influential people I ever met. Well, one of them was the drug owner of the drugstore in Milwaukie, Wisconsin. He tested my honesty right off the bat. I was working there, and it was 25 cents an hour, and $5 bill laying on the counter. Well, I picked it up and gave it to him. But what I didn't realize until much later, that was just to see if I'd put it in my pocket. But it influenced me about being honest and how it paid off, because I had that job for many years. I got 25 cents an hour and $3 for working all day Saturday and $3 for working all day Sunday. But times were tough, and $1 was $1. I had other people, Mr. Stevenson, did you ever hear of him? C.B. Stevenson? He was president of the First National Bank, and he also came to the legislature to talk to, he wanted to meet some of the people who were on the banking committee. And I met him that way, and he asked me to introduce a bill which would combine the trusts of, in the old days, if a person had a trust, they had to form individual trusts for each one, instead of putting it into one big pile and a multiple and make them a common trust fund. And he asked me to introduce the bill, which I did, and we passed it. And I liked Mr. Stevenson as an administrator, as an evaluator of people, and a good citizen. He did a lot of things for the city of Portland. He was an outstanding president of the bank, widely known throughout the country. Well, the primary issue is the same issue as it is today, money. Of course, the budget back in those days, sir, was pretty minuscule compared to what it is now. But we had problems with the schools in those days, problems with getting enough money for the police, the state police, health, welfare. It's the same old stuff. But the thing is that the amount of dollars has multiplied so in expenditures that it's astronomical. I think the legislature has a terrific job ahead of them. They're also, if I may be critical, the leadership has been lacking in the last, quite a few legislatures. We had some outstanding people as speakers of the House or president of the Senate in years gone by. And the lack of leadership is very noticeable how we've drifted. And the partisanship is deplorable. Republicans and Democrats always worrying about each other. I think that's a shame. Of course, I can say that because there were 49 Republicans and 11 Democrats in the House when I was there. And in the Senate, there were 20 Republicans and 10 Democrats. Yet they were nice people. Henry Seaman comes to mind. Henry Seaman was from Klamath Falls, been a Democrat, and represented that county, Klamath County, for years. And you just think the world of him. It made a difference if he's Democrat or Republican, and a lot of them that way. Richard L. Neuberger. He only served one term in the House and has started his Senate term when I was there. And he was very quiet. He wasn't the flamboyant person he became, but a tremendous asset to this state. He was a prolific writer, and it's great to meet people like that. That's one thing I enjoyed about the legislature is the people you meet. Remember Harold Turner, who represented the railroads. They had their problems. And I enjoyed it thoroughly. It was a wonderful education for me in people and in the art of compromise without violating your principles. And that's all legislators have. You have to bargain. You have to give a little here and get a little there. Politics has a terrible implication in people's minds. Politics is the art of government. It isn't whether you're a Republican, a socialist, or what. My father was they called him assemblyman in the state of Wisconsin, served 2 terms, and he belonged to the Socialist Party, which became the Progressive Party of the Republican Party. You might have heard of Bob La Follette. He ran for president one time, won one state, Wisconsin. But his brother Phil was governor of Wisconsin. But the partisanship just tears things apart. It's just a shame. My background had nothing to do with how you were a representative. But you have to study the bills, you have to know what's in them, and you have to be able to talk about them, and talk to your constituents, and talk to other lobbyists. Oh my goodness, what a difference and what a change. Somebody wants to see you, excuse me, he'd come to your desk, you know. You had no privacy. A roll call was a verbal roll call. There were no machines to press a button. Everything was different. But yet, a legislator can hide behind that private office of his, and they do that. It's real hard to see them sometimes. At least it was an open deal for us. The Tax Committee and Ways and Means are the 2 most important committees in the legislature. One finds the money to spend, and the Ways and Means spends it. And it's always a problem of how much to give this or that, or who wants this. But for a freshman to be a member of the Tax Committee was unheard of, and all I have to do is thank Giles French for that. Because he's the one, I'm sure, that told Frank Van Dyke, who was the speaker, that John should be on the Tax Committee. And then, after the session ended, Giles and I were both named to the Interim Tax Committee, which was another big boom for me, because we traveled the entire state for a whole year. We talked in every town, good-sized town, the Dalles, Hood River, Heppner, Ontario. I think we went up to Enterprise, then up the Valley and so forth. And it was a wonderful education into what we were studying, Oregon's tax system. I don't think we accomplished a lot, but we sure met a lot of fine people. And one thing, Howard Belton was he was chairman of the Tax Committee in the Senate. He was a farmer, a dirt farmer from Canby, and he was known as Mr. Integrity, which gives you an idea of how highly he was thought of. Well, he was chairman of the Interim Tax Committee. Eugene Marsh, which my daughter Joan knows very well, was on the committee. People of that stature was pretty nice to have on a committee that way. And Carl Engdahl was a senator from Pendleton, and he invited the entire committee to come to the hotel, and he was going to host a cocktail party and a dinner. And Howard Belton says, no, we're going to spend our own money. Nobody's going to entertain us. Well, we were just devastated. Carl Engdahl could buy and sell practically anybody in the United States, and here Howard Belton wouldn't let us have dinner at I'm still mad about it. Well, it's interesting, one man, one vote. When they decided that, that you can't keep on running consecutively, I thought that was a pretty good deal, instead of inheriting, more or less inheriting the seat that you held. Yet, there is a lack of knowledge among newcomers that the old-timers had that can't be replaced. It's very difficult when you come into a legislative session. Now, I was a lobbyist afterwards for the banking business after I retired. And it's real difficult for these fellows to comprehend what they're facing. There's no continuity because you aren't elected. You aren't re-elected. And I've changed my opinion about that. I think it's a shame that we can't re-elect some of these people. They're too valuable to lose. Now, when I was there, it was $400. You got $8 a day for 50 days. That's 8 times 5 is 40. $400. And you were there, no matter how long you're there, that's out of your own pocket. Now they make over $1,000 a month, don't they? Yeah. It's entirely different, and I'm not begrudging that. I think it's great, because for a man in my position in 1949, it cost me $10 to file and $10 for the next term when I ran, and I had no opposition. I got some Democrats to write my name in, so I won the nomination of both parties, which made it easy sailing. And but some of these people have to spend an awful lot of money, collect it and spend it. Well, I'm proud of the tax bill that we finally put out. I couldn't tell you the details of it right now because I don't forget. It's 55 years ago. But I also enjoyed being in the Medical Affairs Committee. The chairman died. I was the vice chairman, and I succeeded him as chairman. And I'd never been a chairman of a committee before. And it's interesting the power you have. And one of the things that we did, there's registered nurses, and there was also just the other nurses. And they wanted to be recognized more as practical nurses. And surprisingly, it was difficult to get that thing passed. But we did, and made them a deal, and they made us very happy. So they had a big banquet for the nurses, and they had it in all places at the Columbia Gorge Hotel in Hood River. And I was invited to speak to them. And I got there, and I could see that I was in big trouble because they had a cocktail hour that was really a cocktail hour. The good ladies were smashed. It didn't make much difference what I said because they were feeling no pain, if I can put it that way. I think we accomplished what we wanted to accomplish in that session. We balanced the budget. Governor McKay Doug McKay was governor at that time, and he bawled us out early in February for going so slowly. And right now, you get to the 4th of July and you haven't balanced the budget yet. It's so different. Things get dragged out so. We've got had some good governors, and some which are pretty weak, I thought. But I think the most outstanding governor, one of the most outstanding, was Tom McCall. A tremendous person. His vision, his environmental outlook. And you might be surprised when I mention Bob Straub in the same deal. He was a Democrat who did a great deal for the state of Oregon. He was a better governor than a legislator. He comes from the Eugene area. But Bob did a good job. It's a shame that he passed away early in life, comparatively so. Vic Atiyeh was an excellent governor. Paul Patterson. I also liked another person. He was in Congress as Wayne Morris. I used to hold seminars, you might say. They're not seminars, they were meetings at the bank. I did the lobbying for the bank, and I invited, let's say like Hatfield, to come to the bank in the morning. We'd have a coffee for them, and we'd invite about maybe 50 to 75 people, and he would talk about things. And then after they were done, there were about 7 or 8 of us would gather in the president's office for a rather intimate discussion of things that way. And I enjoyed that. Al Ullman, Senator Hatfield, Clay Myers, all those people, Howard Belton, State Treasurer Walter Pearson. We had them all come in at separate times, and it got the people in the bank to know these people as human beings, and they could ask any question they want, and it was a good give and take deal. And that was a wonderful experience for me, because I enjoyed doing that. One person I want to mention, a lot of people do not enter government service, public service. One person that Oregon has missed is Gerry Frank. He would have been a wonderful governor or senator from this state. He gives so much of himself. I had the good pleasure of working with him in Salem. I'll tell you a story. My entrance into Salem, you know how strong the U.S. Bank is. I still don't call it Latin Bush, although the people in Salem certainly do. But I went to a Chamber of Commerce meeting the 3rd day I was in Salem. And you sit in tables, there's 10 on each side, and so forth. And I got there early, I sat at a table, and nobody joined me. And it got to be embarrassing. And finally, one person came in and sat next to me, and pretty soon other people came. And when it came time for introduction of guests, the president of the chamber says, "John," he says, "we welcome you to Salem. It'll be interesting to see how long you last." I was absolutely stunned. I turned as red as you could possibly be and sat down in confusion. The next morning, Gerry Frank called me up. Never mentioned a thing, but he asked me, he said, "Can you take some time for 2 or 3 days? I'd like to introduce you to the people that you should know in Salem." And so he spent 3 days with me, introducing me to different merchants, businessmen, and for a man of his stature to do that was simply incredible. He's also a director of U.S. National Bank and a director of the biggest savings and loan association in Salem. And he and I, he got me interested in the chamber, got me appointed to a committee whereby I was an ex officio member, could sit in on the board of directors meetings, but I couldn't vote. But all it is for I get to know these people. And his efforts toward my behalf were simply astronomical. And he was president of the chamber, and I followed him as president. That's no mean job to follow him, because, well, he's a remarkable man, gives so much of himself, and in such a gracious manner. And we're friends to this day, and I relish the friendship. Well, I think it opened doors. I'll be frank with you, I think it opened doors for me. And I enjoyed lobbying. I had one person, a state senator, and I sat down. He said, "John," he says, "I want you to know I'm going to tape what you're going to say." Well, I said, "That's fine. Tape all you want. You won't find it any different today, tomorrow, or next week, or next year. I have nothing to hide." And I am a little bit offended by saying, "You're warning me you're going to tape it. I won't tell you anything that I don't believe sincerely so." And very interesting comment, though, I thought. But most people most legislators are very receptive to what you have to say and why you want to say it, because it affects your business, and that's why you're asking for his vote. If you're not going to get it all the time. They all have different ideas about things, but I found lobbying very interesting, informative, maddening. But on the whole, it's a necessary process. It has to be done. You have to let these people know how it affects your business. The Saturday closing bill was a big battle. There was a bill introduced by the U.S. National Bank at the request of the U.S. Bank that banks be mandatorily have to close on Saturdays. We took the position, if you want to close, close. We're going to stay open. Well, man alive, every bank in Oregon wanted to close. Every employee of every bank wanted to close, including the people working at the bank that I represented. And I was jeered and hooted because they would like that day off. Well, this became such an issue in 1959 that Howard Belt was chairman of the committee, and Senator Mahoney introduced the bill to make it mandatory closing. And it was a 4-3 vote in the committee, close vote. And he said, John, he says, this is disrupting the entire legislature. He said, I want to leave this bill pass out and get to the floor because we're just neglecting everything else. This is occupying all the time and efforts of everybody, and we got to get this off the agenda. So I said, Howard, I hope that you could speak against the bill. He said, I will do that. Well, that's a great big plus right there, the chairman of the committee going against the bill. And the lobbying was simply something fierce the last couple of weeks. The date was set, and Mr. Stevenson wanted to know if he should come down. I said, I don't really want you down there, sir. I said, they've been lobbied to death. And so the day the vote came, I went out to Portland Golf Club and played golf. But the vote was 29 to 10. Ugh, 19 to 10. There's only 30 people in the legislature, in the Senate. So we won. Yeah. And this was I wish there was television in those days. It'd have been a humdinger. But that was a major effort on my part there. There's a lot of drinking. I don't happen to drink much. I've seen careers smash on the use of alcohol to excess, and most lobbyists do that. I didn't. The bank thought I was a crazy lobbyist, people high up in the bank, because I never entertained in the evening. I'm 5'4". I can't drink with guys 6'4", and neither can I make sense when talking. So I did my lobbying at breakfast time. I take people out for breakfast. I'm better in the morning than I am in the evening. I guess the people, the opportunity of meeting fine people, lifelong friendships. And the sad part about getting older is that these people are dying. So many have passed away that I've held very dear. Former associates of mine at the bank, former people who I worked with in government, and this hurts a little bit. Not hurts a little bit, it hurts a lot. But you gain the value and esteem of people that you worked with by their stand and principles they stand for and how they exhibit them. If they said, I'll vote with you, you know damn well they'll vote with you. And if I've had people come to me or legislator and say, John, I can't support you on that deal. I said, fine, don't bother us at all. We'll shake hands on the deal. You have your viewpoint, I have my viewpoint. And there's no hard feelings. It works. There are a lot of people who offer themselves up for public service are fine people. There are a few scallywags. I had one person, I'll mention to you this. I'd rather not discuss his name. He came in and borrowed $10,000. I said, sure. Isn't it first name Tom? I said, Tom, I made the check out, I made the note out, signed it. I said, what's the maturity? He said, I don't intend to repay it. I said, what? I said, I don't intend to repay it. Well, I took the note, I showed it to Mr. Stevenson, the president. And he said, you rip this note up in front of him in pieces, or I'll go with you and do that if you don't want to do that. Well, that's what I did. I tore the damn thing in front of him. I said, we don't do business that way, Tom. Boy, he was a real enemy of mine for many times. Anytime a bill came up, he'd give it to me any way he could there. But that's the one instance where I found out where a fellow tried to be undercover, scurrilous, nasty thing like that. And there was one other this guy was a senator. There's one other person there whose word I wouldn't trust. I don't like to mention his name either. He's dead, but you couldn't trust what he said. Other than that, 99, like Palmolive, 99.9, they were fine people, outstanding. They were trying their best. Some didn't have the knowledge or perception of the magnitude of state government, but they were patient. They learned an awful lot, and they gave an awful lot. And I enjoyed it thoroughly. That's one thing you asked me before about, what did I miss about it? I missed that, going into the bank. Honesty. Honesty and straightforwardness. Be honest with the people. Be straightforward with them. Say how you feel about it. There are times when you'll be asked to do something and you don't think it's the right thing to do. Don't do it. They'll respect you for it. Oh, Oregon's a wonderful place to live, not only for the beauty of it all. You get me started on that. It has so much to offer. And I tell you, it's a shame that we have a river right out here, you can see it, and it's polluted by the city of Portland, among other things, by pipes going right into the river. That the mayor and the city council haven't arranged this. They get 1/10 of an inch of rainfall in the city of Portland, and it overflows the sewers. It's a disgrace, I think. And to think that the city, the mayor Katz, and the rest of them haven't fixed that up is bad. But as far as the whole thing is the state of Oregon, I feel as fortunate that I found a home here. And a nice wife who'd been married for so many years and have 2 fine children. What more could a man ask for? And there's good people in this state. Look at Nike, how they've progressed. Look at Jerry Frank. Look at the leadership we've had in the Portland Chamber of Commerce. I think the Portland Chamber of Commerce has done a great deal. I called the chamber years ago. I said, when you have people moving to the state of Oregon and they're interested in seeing the outdoors and they have children or not, I'd like to introduce them to hiking if they're interested in that deal. So I met some nice people doing that. And take them on little hikes in the gorge or up to Mount Hood and so forth. And Chamber looks at every angle, and that's nice because that makes these people coming in to feel more welcome. I think if the people want to do something, same-sex marriage or whatever you want to talk about, is have an initiative, I'm all in favor of. It's a people's government after all. I wouldn't take that right away from people. Sure, there'll be some crackpot ideas according to what you think and I think, but they still should have the opportunity to present their views. I would urge them to do it. I would urge them, and they will learn far more than what they think they're going to give, because they'll broaden their spectrum. People are very critical of things that are going to what they think is right, but who knows who's right and who's wrong? And you do your best and study all angles of it. What a legislator faces is requests for exorbitant amounts of money by all kinds of things, including schools. And the Little Red Schoolhouse gains a very favorable opinion about things, but they get a hell of a lot of money. And the roads, the highway department, the prisons deal, you name it, each one deserves a certain portion of that. You can't satisfy them all. There isn't enough money to go around. And to how to do this is one of the primary problems of a long legislative session. And it's real hard for them to figure out who should get what and how much. I feel for them. I've gone down to listen to some of those things once in a while now. I visited the legislature when I was in 1999. I was 50 years a member then, and it was interesting to attend the meetings and listen to the same old stuff, you might say, but bigger dollars. Well, I guess I have one thing, is determination. And it helped me a lot. I think it was also fun to beat these big guys. see, it's always in the back of my head. I had an interesting experience with Ralph Voss. He succeeded Mr. Stevenson as president. And he was a big, tall, and he liked tall men. All his close confidential cohorts were all tall men. And he invited me to come down to Palm Springs, and he asked Margaret to come along also, to speak to the 8 leading people of the banks of the First Interstate First Interstate, and speak to them about political affairs. Speak to what I do as a lobbyist. What do I face and so forth. And he says, I want it all written out, I want to read it. And so I did that, and we went down there and had a wonderful time. It was very interesting, but in the cocktail hour, Margaret and I were walking around this beautiful clubhouse in Indian Wells, and I said, Margaret, look around, all big tall guys. It's funny how people in power, CEOs, I think they're attracted to tall people. Yet it's fun knocking down some of those barriers, and even a little guy have a chance. Well, I read a lot, and Randy just gave me a book here just the other day, and I'm almost finished with it, Randy. Savage Summits. Oh, interesting book, yeah. It's the first 5 women who climbed K2. It's the 2nd highest peak in the world. And I read books like that. I like to read about adventure. I love biographies. I like to read about successful people. I got a whole library full of, like Truman, I thought he was a terrible, and yet he's one of the most respected men now. And he was ridiculed. He wasn't, Roosevelt didn't tell him a thing about the atomic bomb or anything like that. He had to find it all out himself. And it's fun reading about people. I read about Morse. I like to read about people. And I'm very sorry that I can't do the hiking that I used to, but Lord knows I've had an awful lot of hiking under my belt, yeah. I enjoyed the Club River Gorge. I enjoyed Mount Hood. I especially enjoyed Mount Rainier. I've had a tremendous adventure up there. But the beauty you see, the animals you see, because I like the outdoors. It has a good deal. The doctor says I'm living this long because of all my hiking. I'm surprised I'm still talking. I think it was a real privilege to be in elected office. That's the way I look at it. And I was extremely fortunate that I didn't have any opposition, for heaven's sakes. Here I was a young fellow, 36 years of age, didn't know black from red or anything, and to be elected and have the 29 people wrote my name in on the Democratic ticket, and I got the Democratic nomination too, both times. It's really unreal. So I was very lucky. And in life, you have to be lucky sometimes. I've been lucky in having a good wife, lucky in having 2 wonderful children. That's luck, isn't it?